Hello and welcome to the Artist Focus with Beau Coleman. Today we are live broadcasting from the ancestral homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Adwa, the Ojibwe and the Potawatomi peoples. Out of Sight, as an organization, is particularly interested in the conversations around land, site, place. And in today's conversation with Beau, we're really going to be looking at the unexpected surprise encounters that are facilitated in public sites. Beau Coleman is a Canadian and British interdisciplinary artist and curator from the Amiskwacîwâskahikan Treaty Number 6 territory in Edmonton, Canada. Her artistic practices includes performance art, interdisciplinary creation, intermedia, site-specific practices, theatre, video, and installation. She has received exhibitions widely across North America and Europe, in Africa, South America, Asia, and the Oceania. Recent performances include Birth of the Decay, a performance for dogs with Out of Sight Chicago in 2021. Time Regained, which was part of the Nieuwstraat Festival in Dordrecht, the Netherlands in 2021. Breathe, Art Mutation, Braunschweig, Germany, which was online from 2020 to 2021. The Beddorf Nissanstadt in Hamburg, Germany in 2021. Lost Gained, Flow in Body and Sight, which was part of the public performance online symposium that we curated in 2021. The Divide, Die 3 Corpia, About Light Gallery, Edmonton, Canada in 2021, and the Lock Unlock Performance Art Project, which she is a core artist and participates in the curatorial aspect of that program, which has been from 2020 to present. Beau's work as an artist curator includes performances for Urgent Times, Spark, Edmonton, Canada in 2021, and the Zero Gravity International Performance Art Summit in Edmonton, Canada. She is co-founder of and co-director of Spark, Shifting Praxis in Artistic Research and Research Creation, an international research creation hub located at the University of Alberta, where she is a professor of the Theatre of Performance Studies and serves on the board of directors and Performance Studies International, PSI. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Beau Coleman. Beau, could you switch your camera to your FaceTime in the settings, and then I'll bring you into the broadcast. I don't know if you can hear me. Hello, Beau. Can you go to your settings and press it to the FaceTime?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
So if you just press the settings button below, hello,
Hi.
and welcome. So I've just given a little introduction, and so yes, it is a great pleasure to be here with you today, because you really create these surprise encounters for the public. Do you have a piece of work that you want to start us off with?
I am having technical difficulties on this end.
Don't worry, we can fix it. Is there a particular piece and I can try and bring it up if I've got it at my end?
Yes. Now, how do I share the screen for you?
You press share button, and then if you have it in a PDF, I did send you, if you click slides and then select upload from your computer. If you scroll down. So sorry about this, folks. Give us a few minutes.
No, it's my fault on this end, because everything's coming up, as we know that happens. Okay, sorry.
It's the last week. It was the last week of the semester as well. So
yes, it was. It was. So okay, so I've pushed the share, and then
select the slides.
Button, there we are.
And then select upload from your computer. If you scroll down that, it should allow you to upload from your computer.
Okay.
And I'm going to prepare the screen and get ready. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to have you all here with us today. Thank you, Martin.
Carron?
Yes.
I had saved them as PDFs.
Right.
And then now it's not allowing me to open them. So I will just take a moment and save them as PDFs again.
Yes. Well, is there one of these that you would like to start off with? Shall we go in reverse? I've got these pieces.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Yes. Which one would you like to start with? I also have the video Lost and Gained.
So. Yeah, we can start. Oh, that's terrific. So this one was it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I guess it was about a month in, and I was feeling that I needed to be able to perform something. I needed to be able to create something, and I'd spent so much time, as we all have, in our house, and really hadn't been outside much at all. And so I decided that I would perform for cows in this one. That, you know, that would be a little too scary for people to come across me in a park. And so I went to the photographer that I work with, to her farm, and we did a series of images. And so there weren't people except for her and her son, but there were a lot of cows around. And I was just looking for a way to be able to express what was going on, in terms of not feeling like I couldn't breathe, or that we all couldn't breathe. And I was doing this in another image that sort of reflected about death, and so used it sort of as a photo performance to be able to talk about.
Yeah, so I think this this interrelationship with animals is also a running thread in your practice. And can you talk about the ways in which the cows responded?
Yes, this was funny because right now you don't see the cows in the background, but they came from afar. This was the first photo that we did that day. And they were in she has a big farm. They were way over in another field. And that one by one, they started to come over until I have another photo, but not accessible right now, in which I am surrounded by all these cows that are looking at me from behind. They were behind and trying to figure out what it was that I was doing. And it was such a wonderful feeling, actually. I was really moved by it because I felt like they were truly engaging with it. And when I finally was done, then they one by one started to go away. But I really felt like I did perform for those cows.
Yes, and can you kind of describe a little bit of how they responded while they were around you?
I think I wasn't quite close enough to be licked because I knew that was their next, aspect, but just with a lot of curiosity, I mean, we had done some video before and then had sort of looked at it, and there wasn't so much a looking at each other, but just coming into this, into this crowd of cows that, as cows tend to do, when one moves, the other starts to move. And, but they were all it was like a semicircle that was there. And, I hadn't expected that at all. That was really a pleasure.
Yes, and that really connects with the piece that you did for for a program I curated last fall in October. Which can you tell us the story about this performance? Because it's also one in connection with animals.
This is a performance for dogs.
Yes.
This took place in a dog park, and the title came to me first, which was The Birth of the Decay. And for me, it had to do with not only what was going on with COVID, but also in the world, and what was happening with politically, and we hadn't quite gotten to the Freedom Convoy in Canada yet, but also just how everything started to be falling apart. And it was in fall, and I wanted to do something that extended the leaves that I used in another performance that I did for last year's flow. So I wanted to carry over that object and be able to use it. But I really felt like I didn't want to perform it in just a park where there's only people. I had a very strong attachment to this park. We have huge dog parks in Edmonton. They're massive, and this is my favorite one. And so I used to bring my dog here all the time. And it has the river behind it, and it has a hill going down to the river. So I'm actually at the crest of the hill. It's not a very big hill, but so that it then drops down. And there was no context for the fact that this performance was going to be happening. And I wasn't quite sure how people would react if they would say, because we live in a fairly conservative province, whether they would say, you can't do this kind of thing here, So I was kind of expecting a bit of that. But what I wanted to do is through the performance, I put leaves one by one on my face until I am completely covered. And so it just becomes a mask of these leaves. But I wanted dogs to be able to come to me and enjoy the performance and get a bit curious. And so one by one, they kept coming, and they would visit. I could only see certain things before I covered my eyes. And in fact, I didn't see this particular one where this dog had come up and put his head on the table. But it was really fun to be able to have them come around, because I could hear the jingle of their chains. And then I sort of had the opposite reaction from the public. They were more concerned about their children getting in front of the camera. So like in terms of like, don't spoil the picture at all, you know? So they were actually very respectful of the performance. And then at the conclusion of it, when we finally ended it, and I took off the leaves, there was a man that was there, and he wanted to talk to me, and so I spoke with him. I'd seen him at the beginning there, but I wasn't sure how long he was going to stay for. And he came up afterwards, and he talked about how he had never seen anything like this before. Didn't go to galleries, didn't go to any of this, didn't see performance art, and that he was just curious what was going to happen. You know, like, would I cover everything with these leaves? But it was such these are the things that I try to find in my performances, is the either what somebody says as actually part of the performance, where I'm including them, or the conversations that happen afterwards, because I find that the performance that I do is more a catalyst for the other part of the performance. And it's those conversations, or what's a phrase that somebody says that is so poetic that they become the performance in many ways, whether they're formally in the performance, or, you know, we're talking afterwards, and that I get to be the witness to that. And so we had a lovely chat for, I guess, about 10 minutes about it, and how he thought, you know, I should probably go see some art. And it was just really nice. The dogs I couldn't really speak to, but they were having a good time, which was
yes good. Yeah, and you know, just to kind of paint a picture for the audience, you know, there was lots of dog bowls filled with water beneath the table. So they were definite, you know, they were all part of the movement and the choreography, the random choreography in the work, you know, which was, you know, and it was a surprise for them as much as for the public.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think this, you know, these random conversations or these random moments of deeply meaningful experiences is something that, you know, I think is a really important part of your practice. And you know, for me personally, the piece that you did, that was the finale of Flow, Embody and Sight performances for 2021, was a deeply meaningful experience for me. And shall we show that video?
Let's do that. Yes.
We'll do that, and then we can go back to some of the other pieces.
For my performance Lost, Gained tomorrow night, I need your help. I'm collecting responses from participating Flow artists and viewers alike to the following questions. During the pandemic, what have you lost? What have you gained? Once received, I will transcribe and transform your responses into physical objects, which I will then incorporate into my performance. Please send me your answers, which can be a word or a phrase, regarding what you have lost and what you have gained during the pandemic by midnight tonight, so as to allow time for me to work with them. I will also be putting my request and email address in the chat below. I look forward to receiving your responses and incorporating them into my performance tomorrow night. Thank you.
Let me unmute us both. That was Lost and Gained, that you created. So you were, just to kind of describe the context for people, you participated in several practice-based public performance workshops at Flow in Body and Sight in 2021. And out of that, you created this performance work that was interactive, that we did. It was an interactive performance online over several days, where we invited the community that were part of Flow in Body and Sight last year to participate. And then we also, you know, the introduction section of this video also shared it with the public online. You know? So this was another public context, but you know, in the context of an online performance. And so it unraveled over several days. And yes, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. So with that piece, I had been using for that year, because that flow happened, I believe, in April of last year, if I remember, or May. But since the fall of that last year, I had been using the ravine by my house as my studio. Because I was spending so much time inside, I wanted to be creative outside. and so began that in the fall of that year. And so I became very familiar with the space that I kept returning to. And even though I've walked in that ravine so many times, it's just a half a block from me. To use it in another context as my studio was a change of an experience. And every time now when I go walk there, I have that kind of memory in me. So when I was doing flow and doing all the wonderful workshops that were part of it, and being part of that amazing community, I wanted to return to the ravine for these performances. And in this case, you know, I did rely on people sending what they had lost and what they had gained from the pandemic. That was the question that I asked. Whereas before the pandemic, often I would be doing performances where that kind of conversation happens as part of the performance. But of course now we had to do it in a whole different way. And I think what's important here is, in my pieces, as I mentioned before, of trying to be a catalyst for other things. I'm not really interested in what I say about those questions. I'm interested in what other people answer, and then working with that in some kind of poetic way, to be able to bring their messages or the poetry that I hear, which I get to be witness to be able to bring that to the public. And in some ways, that is my own response to those questions. So the piece that I did there with the river and releasing the paper into the river, it dissolves. I did get dissolvable paper so that, you know, it would be okay for the environment. Was sort of a ritual that I was performing on behalf of others to be able to release those messages out. Very similar, actually, when I have done sweat lodges where we do give messages, you know, to the stones to be able to be answered. I hadn't really thought of that connection, but yeah. So that was that piece. Carron, I can't hear you.
Yes, sorry, I keep.
There we are.
Lots of noise in my background here, so
Yeah.
I need to tell myself, put myself on mute.
Sure.
But it's, yes, this idea of, the paper dissolving.
Yeah.
And this, this kind of facilitating these metaphysical moments for the people that participated in the performance. Can you maybe talk more about the material choices that you decided to use? Because that was also an interesting factor.
Do you mean the actual tangible materials?
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly paper that I used. I refer to it as that because, of course, it got written on. I went to a fabric store, and which often I go to when I have to get something for a performance. And I asked them if they had any kind of fabric. I'd sort of seen something online that this was this possibility. And so I went to them and asked, is there any kind of fabric that can dissolve and that is, okay of what it's made of? And of course they were very curious. What do you mean? What are you talking about? And that those kind of conversations are also, for me, like on my end as a witness, are part of the performance also, is just those exchanges where they don't expect to be having this conversation at all today. And so I was able to locate the material. I did test it out. It did work, and yet I could still write on it, which was great. And then I went to find, as we do in different thrift stores and things, to be able to find the right kind of container for these. Um, and I found this, this old chest that seemed about the right size and about the right weight. Um, and then I did want sort of a striking dress of some sort that had a pop of color, because we were dealing with, at this point it's spring, but there wasn't everything's sort of still dead around you. So I wanted something that would pop out, and was able to find this this red dress. And then because I was going into this is interesting because people thought that I don't know what they thought with it, but I have red rubber boots. I just already have them. And I thought, well, I can't really quite do this in bare feet because of how dangerous the area is and slippery. And so I included them. So some people realized that that's what they were, and other people were like, "How did you walk in there?" Which was kind of fun. And then I believe I had a rain jacket because it was quite cold and rainy at that point. Yeah, so I think choosing what is going to be in the frame is very important, whether you're in a public space live or on video, because everything signifies something, right? It's being read, and so I wanted a feeling of respect, I guess, respect from me to what it was that I was holding, because people trusted me with what they lost and gained. In many ways, it was a secret, because I didn't tell anybody what was on those pieces of paper. And I did hold it up to the camera at that one point, but of course you can't read it. Um, and I was interested also in that idea of the struggle to be able to read it, but you can't. And I remember when I did it, feeling like, I was in, like, where I was like lost on an island, and there's a plane going around, and I'm trying to get their attention. It did have that feeling for me when I was holding it up, but knowing that they couldn't really see it. Um, and then being able to let it go. And of course, when I was reading what people had written to me, um, I take those moments very seriously, and want to take very conscious time when I do that, to be able to sort of just be with those phrases, um, so that I can honor that exchange. Karen?
this aspect of communication and intimacy is a really important part of the experiences that you share, that you create. And I'm wondering if you could share about another, you have an extensive international portfolio of performances. And you created a piece in Greece, I believe, in 2015, was that?
That one was 2009.
Okay.
So Long As You Ask Me?
Yes.
That one.
Could you share the story about that? Because it really it really talks about this intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I believe that was the first time I did a one-on-one, I believe. Yeah, I think it is. That was a festival where they asked you to recycle another artist's piece, but to change it, but somehow be inspired by another artist's work. And I chose a piece by Franco B, in which I believe the people have to be naked in order to enter the room with him, and then he just sits there, and so they have to make that choice, right, to be able to, if they want to go in, that's what they got to do, and it's a one-on-one, and that's pretty much all I knew about it, and I'd never seen it or anything. So I wanted to create an environment. It's kind of a contrast, because I needed to create sort of a bit of a pressure on the outside of the room, and then a release on the inside. So if I can explain it, is I had someone with me from Montreal who portrayed a gallery assistant. She was very severe, very serious, very cut hair and everything perfect. And the room on the outside was all in white, and of course she was all in black, and she had this questionnaire that if somebody wanted to be part of this piece, that they had to fill this out. And there were 10 questions, and of course it begins with your name, and it's very, very polite. And then it becomes more and more personal. Like, eventually ask things like, when's the last time you cried? When did you feel alone? So things that were quite deeper, that I would think would seem a bit bizarre as it progressed. It's like, okay, what's going on here? Of course, it's called So Long As You Ask Me. And then, of course, at the end, there's a whole thing, a waiver that they have to sign, that everything will be filmed, and I give away all the rights. And not that I was really going to do much with that, but I wanted that to see who would sign and who wouldn't sign. Oh, now I'm realizing, no, I did a piece in 2008 in Montreal that was quite funny, where there was a very similar kind of technique being used. And then, so when they do sign, then she allows them, she brings them into the room, and now they're in a dark room, but I'm dressed in white. And there's just 2 chairs, and there's a timer, and there's a camera. And so then she begins the timer, and she sits them down, and off she goes. And then I simply am just there. I don't say anything. But I made a rule for myself that if they say something, I can respond, as long as I'm not leading the conversation in any way. And so the interesting thing, of course, is the moment of silence before they realize nothing's going to happen unless they do something. And it can be quite uncomfortable to some degree. And then, someone might say, "Oh, I see. I have to say something," something like that. And then I'll say, "Yes," or "Okay, if you'd like to." And I had this one fellow. He must have been, I think, probably in his mid-50s to 60. He had come all the way from Crete. He had very kind of almost matted hair. Someone, that you don't quite expect coming into this space. He ended up being a shepherd from Crete, and he loves contemporary art. So, so he started to tell me why he was there and what he was looking for. And he told me that no one, and this is, I'm basically nodding at this point. So I'm not leading in it anyway. And he tells me how no one in his village where he's the shepherd understands his love for contemporary art. And so he finds that he has to save up and then be able to see 1 or 2 things a year. And so he chose to come to this festival. And it was both beautiful that he was sharing this and heartbreaking, because I kept picturing him back on Crete on this hill. And he talked about the beauty of art and what that gives him, and feeling very much that no one understands that for him. And even though it's being filmed, I thought maybe I would later make some installation with the faces. I decided not to, because it was such a private exchange that was happening. And I, I feel okay talking about it without identifying exactly who this person is by a name or anything. But I had several conversations like that. I had another person who, after sitting for a while quiet, he said, "Oh, you're an angel," and then he started telling me. So I think creating a bit of the pressure of before allows for this release, and allows for a space, a container, a vessel for them to be able to have the poetic in them and the beauty in them rise up. And that's what I'm interested in.
Yes, and I think, it just makes me think about, the shepherd and the craft that, exists within the whole process of being a shepherd, and how, and the movement, the choreography of the sheep, and how they are moved by the dogs, and how this kind of relates back to the first performance that we had, we shared with the dogs.
Oh, I had never made that connection. That's so interesting.
These circles of intimacy that, happen both, with you, with others, but with also, with the animals, as and other beings in the planet, that is part of an infinite landscape of possibility, in a way.
Yeah, and I think the animal thing is something I may not do solely, but I think it's something I want to pursue a little bit. I'm allergic to animals. So there's all of that, which is, I've had this different kind of a relationship with animals. I love animals, but of course I can't really be inside with animals except for a very short period of time, or if it's poodle, which was my dog. But to be able to exchange with these animals is interesting, and you feel like, there's a tradition in the Catholic Church of the blessing of the animals, which is always fun, where they bring the animals into the church and they get a little blessed, and it's very cute, and it's like, why can't they have performances? Why can't they come? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if we have time. I do have the piece from Cuba, which is interesting, but if we don't have time, that's fine.
Yes, I do want to. People have been very forefront in the chat, so
great! That's
wanting you to answer their questions.
Oh, that's terrific.
There's a person. So now we're moving to the Q&A with the fabulous people that are present in the chat, and thank you for all your wonderful comments. There's a lot of comments.
Wow. Oh my gosh! Oh wow!
one I just want to so this is, please put your questions for Beau in the chat, and we will bring them up. And one question that occurred earlier was they wanted, I think it's Bernard Roddy, wanted to know what was the action that you created in the first performance we talked about with the cows for the breath piece.
Well, the action. I mean, it was meant very much to be a performance photograph, as opposed to. So I was really interested in creating an image for that, and then when they started to come, then it felt like, oh, they're actually watching me do this, which of course is putting that over and then breathing in and breathing out to be able to get the photograph that we wanted. So it was a very different process than other performances. It was my first time really dealing with where I'm strictly going for a certain image. And there was another one that we did, which there was a bit of a stream through the field, and this was the first image that had come to me to do in the farm when I called her up, in which I have a cow skull. It's taking the place of me, and I wanted to play with the land because I was interested in the connection between COVID and climate change, which then has caused, these viruses to be released and come in contact with people, and it's going to increase, to be able to play with life and death with that. And so then the other piece was the breathing in that I wanted to capture. So so that's a little different when you're dealing with just creating the performance image. But it did make me think, wow, animals can respond to these things. Maybe there's more to do. Yeah, I'll never forget that.
And there's also, just to kind of follow on from that question from Bernard, he's also asking, would the dog action also be for camera?
We did, we did video it. But I did ask Brittany, who is the person I work with, to come and take photos. But that was much more of a live performance, and it just happened to be documented, as opposed to, it was part of the flow, so it was being broadcast through. So you did have that. So it was performed for the people on the hill and the dogs, as well as anyone that was watching at the same time. But I was thinking of it very much like a live performance, and that it happens to go through that camera.
And there's there's a few more questions from and comments from Martine. And she made a really fabulous comment earlier on. The artist's body as an in-between to allow for deeper communication to happen. And I think that this is really what your work does. It allows, having personally experienced it, it allows for this deeper place to happen.
Yeah.
And
I very much see it as I'm in service to the performance, as opposed to, like, I happen to do things, but it's in service to the other person that participates, and in service to the actual performance itself.
Yes. Yeah. And Martine asks, was it an element also of the initial, so with the questionnaire, she was asking if it was also an element of the initial work of Franco B.
I think I don't remember any questionnaire. If they had one, I don't remember too much about it, but they certainly, there was someone there to tell them if they wanted to do this piece, they would have to take off their clothes before coming in. And the year before, I had done a piece in, it was a performance installation in Montreal. We took over this, what is now quite a big art center, but at the time was just a raw space. And it was called the Factory Project. Everything had to somehow be in response to Andy Warhol. And I wanted to create a crate that people would go into, and if they could sustain what was happening in that crate, it was like just overload sensory of, there was, I don't know, 16 strobes, there was all this sound that was related somehow to Andy Warhol. If there was a panic button. If they could last 15 minutes, they got put on the famous wall. And if they couldn't, their photo got put on a not famous wall. But I had a maitre d', so the piece was just called 15, and it was sort of like this, club. And I had a maitre d' that again was very, very, very serious, and people would have to sign up. There were other performances happening. They'd have to sign up if they wanted to be part of this. But he didn't necessarily go to the next person on the list. He could choose anyone. So and I wanted that feeling of that some people were like, but I signed up before that, which was happening. And he'd say, well, I'm sorry, whatever it was. And so I think with that also, there was a bit of this pressure happening. And they weren't sure what happens in this crate, but somehow you either become famous or you don't. And then, of course, once they're in there, they realize that it's this crazy, crazy thing that's going on. But I think that is what I wanted to carry over to Greece, is using that kind of technique with another person there. Of course, the pieces that I do are more intimate, but it is interesting to see what happens when you do have a bit of that atmosphere first.
Yeah, and Martine says, she says earlier, I mean the pressure that you created before the public finds themselves one-on-one with you.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, not the questionnaire, but more the way in which you created the tension in the work. Because the audience moved from this one space. I think it was white.
It was white. There were black chairs, or were there white chairs? I forget. And no, they were black chairs in this white room that then had a door that then went into this dark room. So I was very conscious of choosing the space that would have that contrast. I was interested in anyone who wanted to do the performance would have to sit with other people in a waiting room and not sure who's going to be called next, so that there is a bit of, I don't know, will I be able to get in? Will I, that sort of thing. Also wondering what other people, because it's called So Long As You Ask Me, what other people might ask. So not only the gallery assistant and that kind of severity, but this other room that was very associated with contemporary, the white cube kind of space. But it'd be very different if they were in another space, were brought into the white space and they sat alone and then came in. That would be a very different thing. I wanted that they were all sitting there, and then there was a lineup right beyond that. And not sure what was about to happen. And then if somebody had already filled out the questionnaire, watching other people fill out the questionnaire and watching the expression on their face as it got more and more personal. And I was so curious, like pretty much, well, there was maybe about a quarter of people that just wouldn't go there, which was absolutely fine. That was okay. And then and then that release. I have a background in theater, so I'm very aware of space, and it's something that really interests me with installation and performance, is how do you play with space, and how do you make that as active of a performer as yourself within that, and what choices are you having within that frame. of the performance.
Yes, and I think it's, you know, and I think when one works in public places, you know, it's quite hard to, you know, create that intimacy. But there is a large part of your work that is in installation and based in gallery settings. That is really considering those elements. And I also want to bring in a lovely comment that Kathy has made. She says, you know, the urban and the rural connection is so important.
That's so interesting, because as a Canadian, I'm also British, but as a Canadian, we are very connected to both of those. That is a, we think of it more as nature and urban in some ways, like the wild and urban. But we kind of thrive on both. And I hadn't thought about that. That there is that element, certainly in terms of the ravine and you know, sort of the wild there, or the farm to some degree, certainly the rural and the earth and the land. But those of us that live in the big cities, we need to get out. We also got to get out, and we, you know, as well as I need the big city. I need both, but I gotta get out to the mountains. I gotta get out to the forest. I gotta get out. But I need both, and so I hadn't really thought about that. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. And I know when we were watching the live stream with the performance Lost and Gained that we shared with everybody today, you know, the sound of the water, it had been a huge storm.
Yes.
And you were quite worried about, you know, whether you would be able to go into the ravine because, you know, of the rising water.
Yes.
It was quite ferocious, you know, but like as the performance got on, you really got braver and braver and, you know, went further out into it. And then I'm realizing, like, you're literally knee deep.
Yeah, and that stream's usually much lower, and I mean, it's not a huge stream, but it was much higher than normal. And of course, you know, there's rocks and there's all these other things going in there. But isn't that a wonderful thing about performances? You can sort of craft the what it is you want to do. If it's a straight performance action, then sometimes you can stay with that. But when you are so in the moment and you start to realize, you know, that there's even more there, which sometimes it's nice to revisit a performance and use it as a draft and then see, you know, but you can't try to copy it, certainly, but you start to see other opportunities that are there, which is lovely. And so in that way, it was sort of an exchange with the weather to some degree. It was cold. It had been warm as it does here in the spring. It goes warm and then super cold and then back until it figures out that it's going to be summertime. And yeah. So I haven't thought about that.
Yes, and so I want to, if there are no more, are there any more? There's another question in the chat, or comment in the chat from Kathy, and she says, "Thank you. Yes, indeed, there is urban and rural farming and nature entwined."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really glad you pointed that out, Kathy, because it's something certainly that I've been talking about recently, just in life, because there's a lot of us that are trying to figure out whether we're going to stay in Edmonton or not, and needing a balance of the two. but I hadn't put it quite in terms of performance. And that is something that I now can be more conscious of and take a look at. I know I want to do something in the mountains. I really want to do something in the mountains. You know, I did this thing for the BBC years ago. It was for one of their programs, and we were talking about the land and land mythology. And they flew me up in a helicopter and put me on a glacier. And this is like where there's no village nearby. And I remember that strange sensation, certainly, beautiful flying over. But when they landed and the pilot landed and I had to get off, and then off they went, and it was in dead heat of winter, and thinking, if that helicopter goes down, I'm here alone. And then the helicopter was circling with the cameraman hanging out by a harness to be able to get the shot. And I never felt more Canadian. I think so. I mean, it was meant as part of this interview that was being done, but in some ways that was its own performance, and almost was like the holding. I never put that together. It was feeling like that, of the holding of the material with the writing on it. It did feel like, it felt like, okay, hopefully they'll come back. There was a very similar feeling. Oh, I love that.
Yes. So I know we're at the end of our hour, and I just want to also say, Bernard also said that he loved the way such work just allows us to be together.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice place to end. Yeah. And before we leave you all today, we're going to share. Beau and Martine and Dimple and myself have been busy this past week curating the upcoming flow. So we want to share with you the program that we've got together for this year. And so as Beau was sharing in the Artist Focus today, it starts with practice-based workshops, and we have a really amazing group of workshop facilitators who are going to create practice-based workshops. So if you sign up to participate, you can be creating public performances in outdoor spaces in your local context. And then we have also confirmed an incredible lineup of performance art lectures that will start with Paul Couillard in Canada, who will launch the symposium. And also we're going to be promoting Alistair MacLennan's new book, Ashihi, The Actional Poetics of Alistair MacLennan. And we've got a partnership with Intellect Books. So if you sign up to participate in the symposium, you'll get a 30% discount on their live art monograph catalogue. So a really exciting international group of artists who are going to be presenting. And the finale on the final week symposium participants can sign up to create a live performance in partnership with the Experimental Sound Studio. And then we'll have a curated program on June the 19th. And so those have yet to be confirmed, but we're really excited about that possibility. Okay, if there are any questions, please pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we wish you a wonderful Saturday, and thank you for joining me and Flo today. We look And just a little announcement. Next week, we are very excited to host Odan Orimmaladi from Nigeria, who will be in conversation with Ika Trinks, who has a really extensive art, public art performance practice and interdisciplinary art practice. So that is going to be a real treat. And thank you all again, and have a wonderful week. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Okay.
And thank you, Carron. Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.